Max Orr, Melbourne Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club.
Trent Cotchin from the Richmond Footy Club.
Scott Pendlebury from the Collingwood Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Patrick Cooch from the Carlton Footy Club.
It's Rory Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows.
This is Tom Mitchell. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Hey, it's MJ from the Coaches Panel. Jacob Konstanty has made the move. After failing to crack the Sydney Swans best 22, he's moving south of the border in hopes to finally make his AFL debut at the North Melbourne Kangaroos. How big of a move is this for North Melbourne and for fantasy footy coaches? Could we have a handy little cash cow to help us out for the start of 2025? We'll talk about that on today's episode as we review Jacob's trade and one of the final trades of the off-season from the Sydney Swans through to North Melbourne. Jacob's the type of player that not too many people even have heard of him prior to the AFL trade, or if you'd gone back a few years when he was a top 20 pick and a first-round draft selection to the Swans just a handful of seasons ago. The thing that ultimately drew the attention of Jacob to the Swans initially and now ultimately to North Melbourne, he's got some really swarming elite pressure efforts about him. If a team was wanting to get a high-pressure small forward in his draft class, Jacob was rated number one of all small and defensive-minded forwards. His ability to hunt, to lock the ball in, and to pressurize any opponent trying to get the ball out of their forward 50, he's really, really strong in that effort, and we've seen that at VFL level and certainly at the under-18s. He's got some really high talent in that area. He does have some other deficiencies in his game, but when it comes to the defensive-minded work rate inside forward 50, yeah, this kid's got some really nice talent. And so for Sydney, they're just not going to lack in that space. There was no room for him in the side. They were redeploying guys like Cleary and prior to his trade, Luke Parker, into elements of this position. They just haven't needed a space like that. They've stayed relatively healthy in areas around that. And when they have had opportunities in that small pressurized forward role, he's just never been really able to crack the best 22, best 23. So no real loss for the Swans outside of hoped depth of what he could be. But for North Melbourne, I actually really quite like this move for them. They are redeveloping the way this forward line looks and feels a little bit, and part of the redevelopment is bringing a Jack Darling in to bring another marking presence and some leadership and some pressure. Let's not discount what Jack does from a defensive and a tackle pressure side. And it's also what Jacob's strengths are as well, is swarming pressure. I think it's a really nice addition for them. One, it really costs them nothing. Two, it gives them access to at least in his draft class of a few years ago, a pretty highly rated small pressure forward. And it just adds a new dimension. North Melbourne still finding their feet, and the ball just kept pinging out of the North Melbourne forward line a little too easily this year when they did get it in. And so a pressure forward like Jacob, I think, is a really nice pickup. Is he best 22? Look, I think he's going to be in consideration for it for sure. Partially depends on what North Melbourne do with their draft pick. Do they split it, slide back a little bit? There are some other talented smalls that they might be able to get in there either as midfielders, but are developing their craft through the forward line and then move into the mids. And again, there are some talented small forwards in this crop as well. Does a Caleb Daniel play there? No is the answer, but it's certainly an option given where he's played throughout his AFL career. So to me, I think it's a nice pickup for the Roos. It's cost them nothing. And I think his skill set is an area they're lacking in the ground at the moment. They've tried a bunch of different guys through that pressurized forward role. None have really landed with great impact. They've got some nice craft through there now. With the talls, their mediums are okay. I think he's a nice pick. And for us in fantasy footy, I think we do need to keep an eye on him. I think his ceiling of scoring is very, very low. But it depends on the volume of cash cows that come through available to us in our forward line, because the number one thing we actually need from cash cows outside of scoring consistency and volume is consistency of games played. Who cares how good your ceiling is if you can't even get on the park? So there's definitely a space for Jacob to get inside the Kangaroos starting lineup. And if he can, well, there's a world where we at least need to consider him as an option. He's been on an AFL list for a number of years. He knows what's expected to make it at the level. He'll bring some good experience, the culture at the Swans, and I think he might just slide straight into that side. And as a result, for fantasy coaches, yeah, we might not need him because his scoring might be capped as a pressure small forward. But if he's playing every single week and we don't get a whole ton of other options, well, we might just need to go there. So put him right in the back book of your salary cap cash cow watch list. There's at least something to keep an eye on. In drafts, outside of an uber deep draft league, you're not going to go there. That scoring's not really coming through that role, but he's a handy player nonetheless for North Melbourne. But do you agree or disagree with my take about Jacob Konstanty? You can have your say in the comments below if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're listening over an audio podcast and you haven't liked the channel, followed the channel, and given it a 5-star rating, make sure you do so. You can keep in touch with us across social media with all the details in the description of this episode, our Patreon links, and also where you can get your hands on some Coaches Panel merch. All those things can be found in the description of this episode. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in yet again. We hope you're enjoying this series, and we can't wait to be back with you again real soon, talking about another player that's moved clubs during the trade and free agency period.